Welcome to Plus One Forward, the podcast powered by the apocalypse, where we talk about tabletop role-playing games using or inspired by the Apocalypse engine. I'm your MC, Rich, and I'm joined by my co-MC, Rach Shelby. How you doing, Rach?
I'm doing pretty good, Rich. I just came back from an adventure.
You sure did. You went out to that Metatopia place.
Yeah, I sure did. I played a bunch of Powered by the Apocalypse games, both in alpha and beta stages, and I had an absolute blast.
Fantastic. I'm curious. You played quite a few based off the interviews that I'm seeing coming across. Were there any trends or commonalities or just observations that you have from the interviews and the games that you got a chance to play?
So Metatopia is sort of like for those who haven't been, it's a playtesting convention, so we can get a sense of what's going on in the development end of the Powered by the Apocalypse community. It's sort of like a bit of a slice, a little bit of insight, not a full examination. But one thing that definitely stood out to me is people are really right now into hacking Dream Askew. I don't know quite what it is about Dream Askew, but there is something that really grabs hold of people's imagination and inspires them to look at the mechanics and see what stories they could possibly tell with that version of Powered by the Apocalypse.
Yeah, it's fascinating because it breaks so many of the default rules that I come into when I think of PbtA. It's GM-less or MC-less. There are no dice.
It's got a token system.
Yeah, it's pretty innovative. And I think that's a neat bit. I can't wait to hear a few of the games that you had a chance to play. Now, you got to play every one of these before the interviews. Is that right?
Yep. I made it a point to at least play a game with the designer. With one of them, I didn't play the specific one we interviewed, but I did play another game with them recently. So I got a sense of the direction they were taking with Powered by the Apocalypse.
Oh, gotcha. What kind of genres did these games cover?
Oh, man, Rich, it was all over the place, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. I think it's interesting because the genres that you get in playtesting don't necessarily reflect the trends that we see in the crowdfunding market or even what's available online for purchase. To give an example of the games I was playing, I played a aquatic-themed game that explored a sense of community and what we're willing to do to protect and build our communities. I played a 1960s spy thriller that wanted to look at James Bond and take away all those problematic parts of Bond fiction and make it a power fantasy for everyone. I played a game that looked at revolutionaries during 1950s and 60s and the marginalized communities. And then that was reflected back through a science fiction lens. Super cool stuff that isn't really reflected in, again, what's available for purchase right now.
Yeah, it sounds very experimental, really bleeding edge stuff going on there. That's cool.
Yeah, what I especially like about seeing these kind of rough around the edges games is what is being playtested, I feel, reflects more of the designer's passion, because designing a game or designing parts of the game, to stay focused on that requires a lot of love and focus and also a balancing act to not burn yourself out.
Absolutely. I wonder at what point these designers might start to hate their own games from running it too much, right?
Well, that's always like the fear, right? But at this stage, like, they were all excited, a little bit nervous, a little bit anxious, but I'm sure for some of these games, this may have been the first time they were played. I can't even imagine how stressful it could be. There's that love and excitement, especially when you turn to the designer and say, oh, this is this cool thing. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you put it in and how I should be engaging with it? And then their eyes just light up and they're like, oh my God, someone's talking about this cool thing that I built. Oh, that was the best part of the con.
That is so cool. Rach, I love that you go out of your way to make space for these folks to talk about their nascent designs and for us to get an early look at these games. And, you know, some of them may not ever come out publicly, but that doesn't make them any less interesting. And so I think this is great that you do this, Rach.
Thank you so much, Rich. I'm joined now with Taylor Labreche, who is designing the Powered by the Apocalypse game, Descent into Midnight. Hi, Taylor. Thanks for coming out today.
Hi, Rach. I am super excited to be here. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Tell the listeners a little bit about Descent into Midnight.
Yeah, Descent into Midnight is an aquatic role-playing game that seeks to explore the depths of the sentient mind. Pun intended all there. It's an aquatic game about kind of emotions and feelings, and a group of like reef guardians who are all coming together to solve problems and to protect their oceans.
And this game isn't just being developed by you, but a whole team of people, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So I am the design lead for the project, but we also have Rich Howard, who is the aquatic gaming extraordinaire, and we have Richard Kreutzlandry and Brandon Leon Gambetta on the team, kind of all coming together to make this magnificent game.
Fantastic. So what stage of development would you say Descent into Midnight is in right now?
We are in the beta test right now. So we have the majority of like the big moving parts kind of pretty comfortable in how they work. We're just kind of ironing out kinks right now. We are working on some of our smaller niche areas of the game, that kind of stage.
So do you think listeners will be able to find this game on the market in the next 6 months, or do you think it's a little bit longer?
It might be a little longer. We're looking at maybe like a fall Kickstarter release for it. We do have a public playtest out right now at descentintomidnight.com if people want to get their hands dirty right away. But yes, probably looking at like the ending part of next year.
Why Powered by the Apocalypse? There's so many different types of game systems and mechanics out in the gaming world right now. You could have built your own, but you went with Powered by the Apocalypse. Can you give us a little bit of insight into that?
Yeah, I'll be honest. So there's a lazy answer and there's a long answer. The lazy answer is because when we started the project, that was like the system that I was the most comfortable with. The long answer, which is why we have stuck with it, is because we've really found that things like agendas and principles really reinforce like our love for what we're telling. And the move structure really lends itself to giving a message out. So games are systems that send a message. And when you have a structure for a Powered by the Apocalypse move where there's 6 minus 7 to 9, 10 plus, and you can really like structure a sliding scale of how we want this thing to resolve, it lets us send a really strong message. So for example, Descent into Midnight has a kind of a complicated relationship with violence. We don't want to encourage players to use violence, but we know that it's like a fundamental part of our storytelling. So when we look at a move like Unleash, which is our do violence move essentially, we are trying to say like, what is the message that we're trying to say about violence? And that message is it's always messy no matter what the outcome. And so even on a 10 plus, it's not like a great outcome. Like you get what you want, but there is usually more complications to that. And those complications then like further things more to send the message that, yes, sometimes you have to use violence to solve your situation, but it's going to be messy. There's going to be fallout. And this is the kind of fallout that you can expect. So I really love that we have this Powered by the Apocalypse system and structure for it because it lets us play with that in a really fun way.
When we were talking earlier, you had mentioned that Powered by the Apocalypse allows for a different creative space for players than other games and game systems out on the market. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely. So I think that the conversation part of Powered by the Apocalypse, the to do it, you do it, it allows players, and especially how we set it up and encourage it within Descent into Midnight, it allows players to really be weird. And when we think about all the things that the design team loves about the ocean, it's things that are weird. It's like those like, oh boy, that creature looks like, ugh. Or like finding out all the little like quirks and personalities. And when you have Powered by the Apocalypse, the way that it lends player authority and like puts that, it disclaims decision making from the GM. Yeah. It puts that in the hands of the player and says like, run wild with this. We get really, really cool and weird character concepts that you can't really get in like a D20 character creation or what have you. So we have characters like a shark who is made out of mirrors who reflects the violence around them.
So cool.
Yeah. Or like a giant crab who carries their garden with them. And just like the way that moves and the mechanics of Powered by the Apocalypse are not tied to like who or what you are. They are like what you do and the role that you play in this story means that you can really go all out. on creating these weird and like novel ideas.
Fabulous. So if anyone is, again, inspired by what we've just discussed to go and try out Descent into Midnight, could you remind them of where to go find it online?
Absolutely. So you can find our website at descentintomidnight.com, and you can find us on Twitter at DIMRPG.
Thank you so much again, Taylor.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
This is Plus One Forward mini interviews number 2. So I'm joined now by Stentor Danielson, one of the co-creators of the Powered by the Apocalypse game, Get Ready to Rock. Thanks for joining me early this morning. Stentor?
Thanks for having me. And this is the fanciest microphone I have ever spoken into.
It's also got a giant phone box. It's really cool. So Stentor, tell us a little bit about your game.
So Get Ready to Rock is a game about being in a band and getting into stupid rock star drama. It's a GM-less or MC-less game that I've been working on for a while, and we're hoping to have it out February of 2020.
So what stage of development would you say this game is in? Because you said February 2020. That's quite a bit into the future, right?
Yeah, so it's in the stage where I had a workable, playable game, then decided to completely change some core mechanics, tore them all out, put totally new stuff in, and am retesting everything that makes the game work.
Was that original game Powered by the Apocalypse, or did you switch over to Powered by the Apocalypse in this build?
No, this is my first real foray into PbtA design, but it's been in that mode since the beginning. It began essentially as a Monster Hearts hack and then has evolved from there. So it's kind of fun to look at the different stages of it and see how different Monster Hearts pieces have slowly gotten transformed or shaved away as I got a sense of what this game was really trying to do.
Do you have any examples of that switchover off the top of your head? Like, I'm really curious. I'm just wrapping my head around going from Monster Hearts drama to music drama. It doesn't seem too hard of a jump, but maybe a little bit of guidance can help our listeners piece that jump together.
Yeah, so one of the kind of Monster Hearts-ish pieces that is still in it is a riff on the Darkest Self mechanic in Monster Hearts. So Monster Hearts, you take harm and eventually you can become your darkest self, or certain moves might trigger that. In Get Ready to Rock, one of the mechanics is that you have what we're calling issues. So you have something that is your own agenda or your own insecurity or something that's going to drive you to do things against the interest of the rest of the band. And you have a dynamics scale from pianissimo to fortissimo for how loud your issues are in affecting you. And if you hit fortissimo, then you trigger what's called let the music take control, which is something where you act out in some sort of destructive way. So it's a totally transformed version of the darkest self.
Oh my God, that sounds so cool. So what other experiences have you had working through designing for Powered by the Apocalypse?
So one of the things that I've actually found really helpful with PbtA design is the moves framework. It gives a lot of structure to showing where the story can go from a given point. And so one of the ways that's really come in is in making it MC-less or GM-less, because I put out a previous game that was not PbtA called Laser Kittens, and one of the stumbling blocks people sometimes had was in framing scenes. And what should the next scene be about? Because in Laser Kittens, you just come up with an idea for what the next scene should be, and different people can bid on different ideas. And so with designing an MC-less PbtA game, I've created a structure of scene starting moves. So you have, rather than just think of what would be cool for the next scene, you have some structure to what kinds of things can happen next. So you can act out based on your issues to get the scene rolling, or you create a rival band that you hate. And so you can make your rivals do something to provoke you, like they can publicly diss you, or they can just play really well and you can't let that go unchallenged. And so having that move structure has really helped me to sort of guide the story in directions that it should go.
Has the reception to GM-less or MC-less Powered by the Apocalypse been really good, or has it surprised you in any way?
It's been nice to see that people embrace the idea, because most PbtA games that are out there have an MC, and it's a really core part of how the game works, but people seem to have really embraced the way that I'm doing it with Get Ready to Rock, so that's been nice.
If people are looking for more of your work online, where can they find it, Stentor?
My company, along with Cheyenne Grimes, who is co-designing all of the games that we work on, is called Glitter Cats Fine Amusements. So if you look up Glitter Cats, you can find us. We're on Facebook, Facebook/PlayGlitterCats. We're on Twitter @PlayGlitterCats. And we've got a website as well. And then I've got my personal Twitter that's Chef Stentor, ChefStentor.
Fabulous. Thank you so much again for joining me this morning.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I'm joined now by Iris Shia, one of the co-creators of the Powered by the Apocalypse game, Dream of the Empress. Thanks for joining me today, Iris.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your game.
Dream of the Empress is a co-collaboration with Kazumi Chin, and it is a Dream Askew hack that is focused on mythical imperial China, ancient imperial China, and it explores themes around queerness, insecurity, belonging, and disability.
I just got out of a playtest of this game, and just the imagery and the setting that's invoked by it is just so cool, Iris.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about what state the game is in.
Right now, it's an alpha state. Right now, after coming out of Metatopia, the current form that I came to Metatopia in was that we had our playbook moves, where we put all the basic moves in the playbook, and we also had some outlines of what we wanted for our version of the scenarios, which are rooms. And I also had character bios to look at for inspiration. So I think that's about right?
Yeah, like I got to read the character bio for mine, and it was so spot on to the archetype I like to play. I was like, Iris, you should just post it online and like tagged me, because oh my god. Tell us what inspired you to go with Powered by the Apocalypse, and specifically looking at Dream Askew and Dream Apart as an inspiration.
Right. So when me and Kazumi were first working on this game, we first tried to figure out, what we liked in court dramas, and especially because the inspiration for this game came from the Chinese drama Nirvana in Fire, which is an excellent one, by the way, to look at. And then as we were working on it, Kazumi was looking at games and was just like, hey, look at this game called Dream Askew. And I'm like, okay. So we looked at it, and then we decided it would be good to explore what we wanted to do with issues of power and asymmetric power relations by hacking Dream Askew and looking at how they do their moves. And I also realized that what I really wanted was for people to share GM responsibilities, because for myself, I've only been gaming for around a year or two, and I actually find GMing a whole game to be very taxing. And I'm also very interested in seeing what other people would like to create in the environment and how it would exert on the characters. So Dream Askew was actually a really great hack to start from.
You've spent a lot of time looking at Dream Askew and hacking it. Is there any particular move that you looked at in Dream Askew and said, I need to improve this and make it more of my own to work in my game?
In Dream Askew, they have weak moves, which are when the character is acting in a vulnerable place, and it actually helps them generate a token. Yeah. So I noticed that a lot of their moves focus on a vulnerability of interiority, and I thought, well, actually, I'm also interested in experiences of disability as it relates to interiority. And so before I came to Metatopia, I initially struggled with trying to figure out how to include disability narratives into this game. So I initially wrote a weak move is suffer chronic pain at an inopportune moment. And then I went to an amazing accessibility panel on, I believe, Saturday night. I'm actually not sure. But what happened is that I was able to talk to them, and we had a small round table where we could just not round table, a discussion group where we could just actually talk about what's going on in our games. Is it actually truly inclusive or accessible? And I asked them, does suffer chronic pain at an inopportune moment? I feel it wasn't right. I feel it was still this internalized ableism that I was experiencing as I wrote that. And they helped me go, hey, Ashley, you could actually change it to be incapacitated at an inopportune moment. And that was so opening to me because they explained that, hey, if you're incapacitated, it can be actually interpreted by the player that a disability affected that. Or it could have been that like a cat came across your player and you couldn't get to your place.
I love that example because I thought about that and then I realized, I've seen people who have dropped out of a discussion or a situation that's going on because they saw a cat and ran away to chase it. Like that's things I've seen happen.
Right. And like that's a vulnerability that the character was experiencing.
We talked a little bit about recording about the content that we see in games. And with Dream of the Empress, you had mentioned that it's focused on East Asian content and specifically queer content in that setting. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that in terms of the amount of representation we see and what your game is trying to do in terms of making space for, again, more representation and more exploration?
So a lot of people have been coming up to me in Metatopia and going like, wow, like we've never seen anything like this before. I think that's actually really funny to me because, I identify as queer and like Asian American and I love fantasy and historical dramas. So to me, this is everything that I enjoy and like watch on a regular basis. And when I started playing games, I was like, why not make a game about this? And that's what really prompted it. And it was only after coming to Metatopia that I realized like, wow, like I wonder how many like marginalized creators are like in this industry so that games like this is considered like rare because to me like I have a lot of friends from like a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different diversity, and they all have very interesting things that they like. So I'm a little taken aback actually, I'll be honest.
I'm thinking of that type of high-end elaborate Chinese TV drama. Mm-hmm. I have lots of friends who are into watching those and I can't think of a game that represents that in a very inclusive and thoughtful way that's currently for sale on the market.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I'm not familiar either.
So, Iris, if people are looking to see a little bit more of your work online, where can they find you?
You can find me at Twitter at IRISXIE, and my Facebook is facebook.com/IRISXIE.
Fantastic, and thank you once again for coming on and being interviewed.
Thank you.
I'm joined now with designer and IGDN sponsorship winner, Sam Saltiel. Thank you for joining me, Sam.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm very sorry about this voice. It's been a long con.
It's totally okay. It's totally understandable. Some longtime listeners will notice my voice is a little shaky this morning, too, and it's only Saturday. So let's talk about your game, Passing.
Passing is a game that I've been working on since June. On the narrative end, it's about shape-shifting aliens in the 1950s trying to pass as humans. More on kind of the back end, on the more allegorical end, it's a story about queer erasure, specifically about this very impossible contradiction that those in the queer community need to face. That's kind of like they can either expose themselves to the world and live as their true identity out in the open and face a form of erasure through violence, or they can kind of shut it down and not be open about it and face a form of self-erasure.
What phase would you say that Passing is in right now for development?
It is fully playable at the moment. I'm still working on the mechanics. I don't have a lot of the text yet, but hopefully the mechanics should be done around December, and I'm hoping to get it out in Ashcan form by Gen Con.
That's super exciting. I look forward to having you back on for a full episode. So why Powered by the Apocalypse?
I mean, part of it was because I'm working on Magpie games with this. By the way, I want to say that their help has been invaluable in this process. So part of it was that, and that they use Powered by the Apocalypse, but it is also genuinely my favorite system to work in because I am also a fiction and poetry writer, and so one of my main interests in gaming is the narrative component, and I feel like Powered by the Apocalypse is a system that specifically points back to the narrative in a really important way. I think it's simple enough that I would use it to teach someone how to do tabletop RPGs, but I think there's so much control that the designers can use in terms of the move and the mechanics that I think it can be very elegant in terms of the way that it's structured. Yikes.
It's okay. Is there an example from your design so far that you feel highlights the narrative focus of the game systems or game design mindset?
Yeah, so I've recently decided to, instead of using stats for half the basic moves, roll with questions, which I'm a big fan of in the way that further points back to the narrative. This might all be subject to change, but the other half of the stats, or the other half of the moves, use stats called human and alien that are shifting according to the narrative choices that you make. And so I like how what you do throughout the game affects the way that you are able to function.
You've talked a little bit earlier about erasure and identity erasure in the game. How is that mechanically handled?
At least for me, it's embedded in every part of the game. Each one of the playbooks is based off of the way that people are erased. There's a playbook called the Intermingler, which you're fairly familiar with.
Yes, in the playtest, I built a character for that, and we talked a little bit about the moves and how that character works.
Yeah, so on my end, I realized that these can all be interpreted in many different ways, but on my end, that playbook was based off of people in the queer community who are straight marrying, and so they might be told, like, well, you're not queer anymore because you're married in a heterosexual relationship, right? And so, like, that's a form of erasure of that sort of identity. So it's built into the playbooks. It's also built into the human and alien stats in the way they have to feel like they have to constantly balance, but are constantly erasing parts of themselves by trying to make these difficult choices.
Fantastic. If people are looking for more of your work online, Sam, where should they go?
I have a professional Facebook page that's Sarah with an H, Saltiel, Saltiel, and my gaming work, my poetry, and my art should all be on there. I also have an Instagram that's S_Saltiel.
And thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm joined now with designer Hamish Cameron, who is going to talk about his new game he's playtesting at Metatopia, Codename Mindblock. Thanks for coming and joining me today, Hamish.
Thanks, Rach. It's great to be here. Great to be back at Metatopia.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about Codename Mindblock.
So Codename Mindblock is a sort of working title of a spy game that I'm working on. It really will not be the final title, and if it does become the final title, you can come back and quote me on that, but I don't like it. But it's a game of espionage, a sort of revisionist take on Bond-style spy espionage games or movies.
When you say revisionist, what do you mean, if you want to expand it for the audience?
One of the main design goals is that this be a Bond game that we can play in the 21st century with anybody, so that Bond is kind of like a power fantasy, right? But Bond is a white male power fantasy, right? And I want this to be more inclusive. So,
yeah, like I've often heard Bond described as dad fiction before.
Right, exactly. And this game is not dad fiction. This game is everyone fiction.
Yeah, based on my experiences playtesting, that's definitely the case. What stage of development would you say this game is in?
So they're listed on the program here as alpha tests. The game itself is kind of playable almost at a beta level, but because I have been running the game from basically beginning to end, and the time constraint is the only reason why it's not further. But I really just started writing it, and so there's a lot of extra things I need to do, so it really is a kind of alpha.
What interesting Powered by the Apocalypse mechanics and design spaces have you been working with in this game?
So one of my design philosophies across all of my games is that I want prep to be as minimal as possible. I want to be able to pick up and play basically with maybe like half an hour or less of thinking about it. And I want the game to do all that heavy lifting.
What's an example of that type of design currently in the alpha/beta form?
Yeah, so one of the main sort of conceits of the game is that it's two players, one of whom is the agent and one of whom is sort of all of the other players that help them. And so in order to like make that work, like, because that's the structure of a Bond movie.
Yeah.
So in order for that to happen, I have to work out different ways of transitioning between these characters, like introducing and them leaving the story, whether they're loyal or not, in various ways that the support character has enough of an impact on the plot that they don't feel just like they don't, because the agent is the protagonist in this. The other character has to feel like they are at least as much a part of the game, even though the individual characters are less important.
So when I did the playtest the other day, I was playing as the agent and the other playtester was playing as the support. There's a couple different flavors of support, correct?
Yeah, the support at the moment has 5 different sort of sub-playbooks that they pick up and put down during the game. They can either be a lover, a rival, an embedded agent of the agent's agency, or a local person, or an expert in some sort of part of the villain's scheme. Yeah, then the other thing that I am doing is, and this is part of the part that is not yet in any way finished, and that's the locales. So part of the game is going to be traveling around the place and the agent finding things in different places.
Oh yeah, that part was really cool because there was a lot of these sort of, okay, we're going to the new locale and that's inspired by this new plot twist that occurred and you discovered a clue and now you have to do a quick montage of how you get from point A to point B. But then the support character or the support player gets to frame, yes, that's how you get there, but what is it like when you arrive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a good example of that. What I was talking about before. I want that player to feel like they are making a serious impact on the story, right? That they are they are equally one of the 3 people at the table with the MC and the agent. They are just in this sort of quasi role between MC and player.
Yeah, and I really think that kind of not quite MC, not quite role, and also seeing the MC kind of shifting around that role is really neat. And I'm excited to see future versions of the game and how that solidifies as a play style.
Yeah, it's a style that I quite like playing as well. When I play Fate, I do that a lot. And I just sort of try and act as a support and lay down a lot of advantages for people. And so, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do here.
Amazing. And Hamish, if people want to find more of your work online or perhaps get updates for this game, where can they go?
They can look at my website, ardens.org, ardens.org. I just actually made an Ardens Ludere Facebook page, so you can like us there, and the Sprawl Facebook page and Twitter and so on.
Fantastic. Thank you so much again.
Thanks. It's great to talk to you again, great to see you again, and great to be here again.
+1 Forward is a production of the Gauntlet community, Richard Rogers and Rach Shelkey. You can find us at gauntlet-rpg.com or follow us on Twitter at +1FWD. If you would like to support our show, visit our Patreon site at patreon.com/gauntlet. The games mentioned on this show use the Apocalypse engine, which is a creation of Vincent and Magay Baker. The music for +1 Forward is from the Savage Aural Hotbed CD Gomi Daiko. The songs used are Gomi Daiko, Metal Version, and Drowning Attitude. You can find more amazing tunes by Savage Aural Hotbed on their website, www.savageauralhotbed.com.